There are so many personalities in Indian history that we can all follow their example. And in this series, we're talking about specifically incredible women from Indian history. And one such woman that we're going to talk about today is Gandhari. And Gandhari is an incredible woman in so many different ways. An example that even certain aspects of her personality that even men can follow. So let's get into some of her special qualities that made her who she was, and then how some of her special qualities led to certain big events in history that left an indelible mark on the minds of all of us and in the stamping of history. Okay, so we have Gandhari, and her family gets this marriage proposal from Bhishma, and Bhishma comes to Gandhari's family, her father, with a marriage proposal to marry Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra was a blind Kuru prince. So Bhishma came with this marriage proposal to Gandhari's father, and her father and the family rejected that proposal initially because they did not want their most beautiful daughter to be married to a blind prince. But later, after consultation with all the ministers of the kingdom, her father and the ministers and everyone decided that it was a safer bet to get Gandhari married to Dhritarashtra, because if they did not do that, they all knew how powerful Bhishma was, and if he would take Gandhari back home with him, to Hastinapur by force, it would be an extremely embarrassing situation for the Gandhar king. So then Gandhari's father and everyone decided that they had no choice but to give her hand in marriage to Dhritarashtra. So when Gandhari was given this proposal and when she was on her way to Hastinapur, before that, she decided to blindfold herself. And since that day till the very end of her life, she kept her eyes under blindfold. And why did she do that? Because her would-be husband was blind. So she did not want to have or exhibit any qualities that would be greater than her husband. Now, this is something that we have heard through the different stories. And then there are different perspectives around this particular act of hers also. Some people say that she was just trying it out as to what does it feel like to be in this blindfold for some time. And then because of some word jugglery, she got committed to that decision. Some other people say that she was so angry with Bhishma for bringing such a proposal because she was known as one of the most beautiful and one of the most capable women in the planet. So she was so upset with Bhishma Dev that she did that as an act of anger, without realizing what the consequences were. Nevertheless, to have a fully functional organ of your body, and more than the organ of your body, to have a fully functional, one of the six senses, your Gyanendriyas, and is being fully functional, but to voluntarily, throughout the entirety of your life, blindfold yourself and choose not to see anything, is definitely a very brave act and a very big act of tapasya that very few rare determined souls can follow. So having said that, Gandhari gets married to Dhritarashtra. So we have a blind couple. And Gandhari throughout the proceedings in the Mahabharata, throughout the different incidents that happened in Mahabharata, we can experience her as this voice of reason that is trying to caution Dhritarashtra to not get into the means in which he was trying to get into to push Duryodhana in the front, or the way he was allowing all those different unfair things to happen to the Pandavas. So we hear her as a voice of reason, but very sadly, she comes across as a very weak voice of reason. So we have this blind husband and a blind wife. Again, very, very difficult tapasya to do. But because she was blindfolded, and when Duryodhana was born, Duryodhana did not get a parenting that, a normal parenting that could come from normal parents, Both of them were blind. Now in this case, if Gandhari had chosen not to keep herself blindfolded, and rather she could have been a supportive visionary for her husband, keeping her eyes wide open, and she would have been able to correct Duryodhan and take care of his parenting in a better way and correct him instead of being in that helpless role. So while her chastity towards her husband by blindfolding herself is something that is worth unlimited praise, but at the same time we have to look at the entire action in its entirety and see what kind of impact it had on the world. So one thing is, Duryodhan grows up to be an extremely spoilt brat. Another aspect of Gandhari's personality is we see when even before Duryodhan is born, and when Gandhari and Kunti, Gandhari is pregnant and she's been pregnant for a really long time without having a delivery. And when she hears that Kunti has given birth to Yudhishthir Maharaj, out of the natural jealousy that a woman in her situation could experience, she hits, her womb very hard, and she ends up, having a sort of a miscarriage where that entire lump of flesh comes out. So that jealousy which she had towards Kunti Devi for giving birth to her son earlier than Gandhari is also rooted in the sense of wanting her son to be the king. And finally, of course, Vyasadeva comes, and then we have, Vyasadeva divide that entire lump of flesh into 100 different pots. And, that's like, a lot of people say that's like the first test tube babies being born. So 100 sons are born. So just because Gandhari had blindfolded herself and she was a tapasvini, the Srimad Bhagavatam describes her as a tapasvini, Gandharim cha tapasvinim. So definitely that tapasya is very austere and very, very difficult to follow. But that did not make her, that tapasya did not separate her from her negative qualities. That the fruits of her tapasya, she did not use that to develop good qualities, to develop more saintly, more qualities that were following more in the line of Bhagavad Dharma, or even in the lines of Rajya Dharma, and doing the right thing at the right time. What did Gandhari as a person do with the fruits of that tapasya? So whenever anyone does some kind of austerity, it is the law that they will get some positive result out of it, even if they do it for the wrong motive. And we see different personalities in history like Hiranyakashipu or Ravana who did a lot of tapasya and they got some mighty fruits for those things. So Gandhari also had received some mighty fruits for doing that tapasya. And what was one of the fruits? When towards the fag end of the war, when there was no hope for the Kauravas to win, and it was finally decided that Duryodhan and Bhima would have their duel. So in order to protect her son, Gandhari, she removed her blindfold, and through that Shakti and that Tejas that she had developed because of this tapasya of keeping her eyes blindfolded and being a chaste woman towards her husband, the fruits of that, she used it to protect her son's body and make it as good as iron. Again, it was not her, the way she used her fruits of tapasya was not rooted in dharma. The way she used the fruits of her tapasya was again to achieve the kingdom. So she and Dhritarashtra in one sense had the same desire. It's just that Dhritarashtra's desire was more obvious. But Gandhari also had had the similar desire. And that's why I say that even if she was a voice of reason for Dhritarashtra, it was a very weak voice of reason because she still strongly desired for her son to become the king. So being blindfolded is tapasya, Gandharim cha tapasvinim, and even men and women can follow that example for their growth in their life, where they voluntarily have delayed gratification of their senses, or they don't pay heed to the demands of the senses, and they follow a life of tapasya rooted in dharma, rooted in duty. But at what cost? Let's now look at certain angles where, if Gandhari was not blindfolded. If Gandhari was not blindfolded, we have so many parallels in history where we have people like Ahilya Bai Holkar, recent history from the 1700s. And Ahilya Bai Holkar, also her father-in-law Malhar Rao Holkar, had seen Ahilya Bai somewhere and he really liked her. So he got her married to his son. He knew very well his son was not capable to run the kingdom. He knew very well that his son was not full of all the good qualities that were required for a king. But he married Ahilyabai to him, and instead of depending upon his son to rule the kingdom, he trained Ahilyabai in the entire administration, in the entire Kshatriya dharma, so that she could become a bigger asset to the kingdom than the king. So here we see a woman who is not downgrading herself or not subduing herself unnecessarily to a weak husband. We see that Ahilyabai is still following her chastity, she is still chaste to her husband, and she is following her dharma as a woman, but she is also following the higher dharma, which was to protect dharma. Had Gandhari done that, in many ways a lot of historians and a lot of experts call out Gandhari to be the cause of war. If she had not blindfolded herself, she could have also run the kingdom on behalf of Dhritarashtra. She could have also taken the support of very, very realized Mahajans like Bhishma Dev, very, very realized personalities like Vidura. And a very important thing, if she had not blindfolded herself, Shakuni would not have been a part of her dowry. The reason Shakuni joined her is because my sister is blind, so I have to support her. Now this is a person with a fully developed sense and a fully developed quality, but not choosing to use it and allowing another person to come in and bring in their nature, bring in their bad qualities and lead to destruction. So if Gandhari was fully aware of her role of being Dhritarashtra's wife and she performed that role, she could have performed that role by being fully, not having that blindfold, and the entire history could have been something different. So when a lot of people give this example of Gandhari to especially women, that women must follow Gandhari, what we are trying to propose here is that Gandhari's qualities of the tapasya that she did can also be followed by men. Austerity and tapasya is going to help every one of us. But we cannot push women into doing it because we have to look at what the consequences of Gandhari's action were. And a very, very important factor to consider is that Gandhari blindfolding herself was something she did voluntarily. Bhishma Dev did not tell her to do it. Vidura did not tell her to do it. Her parents, her brothers did not tell her to do it. That was something she did of choice. So every woman will be able to do her own austerity and her own tapasya according to her capacity. And just to prove her chastity, she doesn't have to subdue herself and she doesn't have to, be behind in, her qualities just to prove her chastity. She can be a fully grown person, situated properly in her identity, and be completely dedicated to the role of a wife and a mother and the higher role that she has towards society. Many times in life, we are going to get this call. Life is going to demand some response from us. Yes, it's like a doorbell. When the doorbell rings, the mother may ask the daughter to open the door. And the daughter may say, I'm doing my homework, why don't you open the door? And then they get into an argument and the doorbell's ringing the second time. Then the grandparents get upset that look at this younger generation, they're not opening the door. Finally, one of the members of the house gets up, opens the door. So everyone is responding to the doorbell. Everyone is responding. The mother's asking the daughter's saying no, then they're getting an argument. Then the grandparents are also responding to that particular event that there's a doorbell. But no one is being able to do a positive action, which takes the situation to the next step. So life is going to demand from all of us a response. Now, how we respond according to dharma and according to what is truly beneficial to yourself, to your family, to your society, is what is going to determine the goodness of it. So, having appreciated Gandhari's qualities as a tapaswini, before we force women to follow her, we have to realize the ill effects of that action also. So yes, we all take the example of her tapasya and we definitely remember her greatness for that. Thank you very much.